How's it going, guys? Coffee here. Today I wanted to talk about some updates from some devs here, going over important game mechanic changes, I guess, that are different from Path of Exile 1. So if you are coming from Path of Exile, these are going to be some things that are different, as well as I will explain them here best I can for any new players as well. So first things first, Viper-esque here. This is from the Discord. He does have a GGG icon next to his name. You can't see it here for whatever reason, but this is someone on the developer side answering questions on the PoE2 section of the Discord. So the first thing first is they're talking about there's no distinction between gem and non-gem skills for basically for anything. So when you get plus level to cold skills, that levels up skills that come if they start on a piece of gear, or if they come from an ascension, things like that. They will still get their plus levels on them as well. So something that was actually seen when they showcased this video, for example, or what we showcased in this video with the Infernal Hound. Again, it shows up here. We went over this in yesterday's video. These do have levels to them. So you can see the Hound has a level itself, and the Hound's level will increase as you level up, as well as is affected by plus levels. So plus to minion levels will also affect the level of the Summon Hound. So the War Cries can now empower channeling skills. Basically, that's the only big change. I don't even know exactly what are the channeling skills for. What channeling slam skills there are, but I guess it would be... I'm not actually sure. Let's see. Oh, Resonating Shield. I guess that's what it is right here. Damaging shockwaves around you. So this would be considered a skill that is maybe... can be affected by War Cries. I guess this is the one here they're talking about. So that's actually kind of cool. It's got a pretty decently high mana cost, but what if you were to use this with something like Infernalist again, right? Where the mana cost is not that bad because you just end up self-hitting by just spamming your mana skill, or spamming it because you effectively have infinite mana. So something that can be interesting. That is actually very interesting because on Infernalist, if you're blocking everything, you can't really take damage. So fun things to play around with, but let's not get off topic here, off track. But yeah, main thing again, War Cries can empower channeling skills now, so just they can empower everything, so it's a good idea to look over them, and we'll cover them when we cover the next video, kind of going over some melee stuff. Base player movement speed is the same in both games, so the only difference that we're going to notice in movement speed between Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 is going to be the loss of Quicksilver Flask, and then the loss of movement skills. So hopefully they do at least give us a little bit of extra sources of movement speed to make up for the fact that we, again, don't have movement skills, and that we are losing Quicksilver. So hopefully that feels nice. But I mean, again, if the pack sizes are there and the time to kill is fine, then you don't really need extra movement speed, right? Everything's all relative. How quick or slow you feel is just going to be based off of what you know. So it'll take a little while to, I guess, lose the comparison to Path of Exile 1, but I think we'll be okay with it. So this is one of the big ones that absolutely changes here, is that Ignite and Shock chance are based on the damage relative to the monster's ailment threshold. So this basically means that your chance to shock and your chance to ignite is based on the actual the size of the hit, rather than just being affected by crits. So crits are going to increase your chance to cause ailments because of the fact that they're doing more damage, but it's not going to guarantee a ailment just because it crit. So this does change. There's also some number calculation changes that are covered here in this next slide. This one's fine. He's talking about res. Basically, you don't need it as much as you did before. You're expected to get it as you get further into maps, but it's not like expected or where you're going to be severely punished by not having max res. I honestly feel like you're not severely punished in the current game either in PoE, so I don't think that really changes anything. But triggered skills can't generate energy. This one makes sense because of the fact that they didn't want to cause trigger loops, for example, right? So it's one of the ones we covered yesterday was cast on minion death, this causing an explosion, right? If we have cast on melee death and we're using fire skills, we can't use those to then trigger a cast on ignite. That will do something, right? Or you can't have a cast on freeze that is going to cast things that are going to ignite something, and then the cast on ignite cast something that's going to freeze something or shock things. They want to avoid these like trigger loops that just go on forever. So that one makes sense. That's fine. I understand it from a balance perspective. The next thing we have here is minion counts can also be specified per weapon set. I think this one, again, the nuance of this is all going to come down to, because if you are swapping weapons, you want to make sure that you are, you might have more minions, a different type of minions that you have on, say, a specific weapon set that you want. If you want all caster minions on one weapon set and then all melee minions on another weapon set, you can basically swap between those. That's good information to have. And then you can basically change this depending on what it is. Auto attack having sockets. I know they basically mentioned that face breakers were a gigantic mistake for them and not something that they were that happy about, so I don't expect them to bring back face breakers anytime soon. But as it did make the design space extremely complicated all the time. It was always just this outlier kind of scenario that they're like, oh, don't forget about this, or it's going to end up being way too good and be kind of game breaking because of how cheap and easy face breakers are to get. And for a while, face breaker meta was a thing, and it was great. You know, I had a good time with it personally, but I understand why they want it dead. Again, that one makes sense. It has sockets, but I don't think, again, they're going to lean into that space as heavily as they did in PoE 1. So this is in regards to the Atlas being infinite, the same way as Delve is infinite. For those that didn't play PoE, there is a guy that goes by the name of Shitstained Steve who did hit the limit for Delve, which is, yeah, he hit the Delve limit of 65535, you know, the maximum depth limit for, what is that, an int or something? Before he ended up, basically, again, he hit the limit over the span of a league. There's a lot of celebrations for it. You can actually find it on YouTube if you want to look around for it. So it's kind of exciting times. It was pretty cool to see. But that's basically all they're talking about. The Atlas will be infinite. I mean, none of us are going to be getting deep enough in depth for that, I don't believe, just because I think they're saying in regards to the time constraints, you're probably not getting to that tier, and I believe things probably scale to some certain degree or something that's going to prevent it from having the damage or numbers necessary or capable of actually doing the content there. So good to know, but again, nothing really changes except our Atlas is Delve. I think this is in regards to saying spells can't get flat added damage anymore. So they just don't have flat added damage anywhere on the tree. I don't remember seeing if... I guess they must not have that as a mod anymore, if I had to guess. It's probably just for the sake of, again, they mentioned a lot of the design space for PoE2. They're trying to make it more simple for newer players, things like that. So having... adds this much damage is confusing to a new player. If you saw adds, 148 to whatever cold damage, you're going to assume that it's going to work for your spells, when in fact it only works for your attacks. So they will probably have something that basically mentions that it only is going to affect the attack and not the actual spell damage itself. And it looks like the added supports are just percent based instead of, and they only are affecting attacks now, as you can see, not spells. So, or this one doesn't affect spells, at least. Yeah, none of these affect spells. These are all only attacks. This, I presume, will have an attack tag, but it looks like it doesn't affect spells. So, Damaging ailments care about the final pre-mitigation damage of the hit now, so crit damage naturally affects ignite damage with crits. So this is completely different from Path of Exile right now. Right now, if you crit with a fire damage hit, it does not affect the ignite damage whatsoever. Now it will. So that's actually interesting. It does mean that you can actually focus on crit on an ignite build now, just to actually get a much larger ignite. That gives some extra room for scaling and some extra things to build around. So, you know, it might be a good change or something else to lean into. So, it also does mean that running supports that have a penalty on the hit damage, for example, will have a overall impact on the end ignite damage, right? So before, the idea was that you could affect the hit damage, like run something like Deadly Ailments, right? Which is going to lower the hit damage by a ton, but increase the ailment damage, right? So 80% less damage with the hit, but it also affected the ailment because the ailment calculation came from before the damage from the hit. Extremely confusing stuff, especially for a new player. So having everything all bundled into one to where it's easier to kind of stomach and to understand, I think is going to be a positive change. It just means we're going to have to learn exactly how the ailments actually work now. And they did cover this. From what I've been told, it's basically 20% of all the damage is how it gets calculated, at least for Ignite. I believe it's the same for Bleeds and Poisons. It might be very similar or very much the same, but I know Ignite damage will take all of the damage from the hit. It doesn't just take the fire damage anymore. It will take everything. So that is good to know. Yeah, it's basically bundling in all the damage and using that to get the Ignite, so you can Ignite with basically anything regardless of damage type now, from what I've been told. So that's actually good to know, and it is definitely a big change in regards to how things go, because right now it's basically fire damage and fire damage only. So this is a big fundamental change. This looks like it is in regards to the iframes that are on the dodge roll. Those are only in effect basically on the first portion of the dodge roll, not the second half of it, right? So basically you're going to get those iframes for the beginning of the dodge roll animation, but obviously you're at a disadvantage because you're locked in the animation without any ability to do any defenses on the second half of the dodge roll. So that's the way to make sure you don't, if you mistime your dodge roll, you have a chance to get punished. So Druid, they're basically confirming that flails are coming with the Templar rather than when they release the Druid. We don't know when either of these are coming out, so this isn't really relevant now. More so just saying that flails aren't in the game yet, and they will not be in the game until Templar comes out. Here they are talking about how crossbow skills can take advantage of +1 projectiles. So if you're coming from Path of Exile, if you have a skill, for example, and you had the support greater multiple projectiles in Path of Exile 1 right now, and you fire 4 projectiles, they will fire out kind of how they look on this gem right here, right? Let's go. Time for another paint build. So if you fire these, right, and you fired your 5 projectiles, and even if they looked like this, right, and they all went together, even if this was the big bad boss here, right, that got hit, because all 5 projectiles came at the same time from the same attack, the boss would only take damage from one of them. Versus a support like Barrage, what this does is it makes the projectiles fire sequentially. So it's basically like this one fires like this, and then this one's slightly behind, and this one's slightly behind, and this one's slightly behind again, and slightly behind. Sequential attacks are allowed to all hit the same target because they are basically not at exactly the same time. So it's not at the exact, basically like frame, right? So what that means is they are saying here is that the design of crossbow skills is that they will fire extra projectiles in sequence rather than in a spread. So that means that every time you add extra projectiles, you're just actually giving yourself more damage without it just being something that's going to be better for clear but not going to increase your single target damage. Things that have AoE damage, like the grenades they're speaking of here. Grenades, for example, will each have an explosion, right? So if you actually had a skill that's going to fire your 3 grenades here, let's go back to the brush. So if you have your skill that's going to fire your 3 grenades, you have a grenade here, a grenade here, a grenade here. When these all explode, right? So this one explodes, this one explodes, this one explodes. If you have enough area of effect, then say a monster that was right here, right, would get hit by both of these grenades. They're going to get hit by this grenade here, they're going to get hit by this grenade here. This grenade will miss them. If you get enough area of effect damage, then you can make it to where, say the explosions were this big instead, right? And they're this big, then if a monster's standing in the middle, they're going to get hit by all 3 of these, right? So that's the idea of scaling area of effect for area skills or things that have large explosions. So that is something that can be very beneficial. Again, obviously on this class, everything is beneficial in regards to extra projectiles or increases the area of effect, because you're going to increase the total overlaps of things that are hitting the target. Last debug res, I'm not sure. Oh, I think, let me see. Let me see. I think I remember these are, I'm trying to remember how this works in regards to this versus PoE. Additive. Oh, I don't remember the math on this. I'm going to need to find some more information on this. So, yeah, I can't answer this one. I'll try to cover it in the comments as soon as I find an answer. I don't want to waste your guys' time any more than we already have. Same thing here. They're talking about combos of specific skill. And they're talking about combos on multiple skills. Yeah, it doesn't interact at all. So things combo with specific things and specific things only. And that will be tied. Keystones and jewel sockets are off limits for weapon swapping passives. So this basically means you can't have like a keystone that only activates when you press it, because you can attach skills now to specific weapon swaps. So you can say, when you use this skill, your character will basically swap to that weapon to use that skill, and then when you press another skill, it will literally swap back right away based off of whatever weapon you have. And you can have a specific passive tree for just that skill. So say you're using a staff and a crossbow, you can have points on your passive tree that only affect your passive tree while you're holding your second weapon, aka your staff, that go in there. And then when you swap back to your bow, or your crossbow rather, they're not going to affect you there. So they are saying that keystones and jewel sockets are going to be off limits for this. Just probably there's a technical limitation on that, I'd presume, in regards to how it loads your keystones and stuff. But there's also some balance things, right? You'd probably be able to get away with doing some weird things, like where if you were using something that made it to where you can, say you could only use totems, for example, right? If you were using this, I guess this doesn't do the same thing as it does in PoE1. In PoE1, Ancestral Bond makes it to where you can't deal damage, but you can summon an extra totem. If they had something similar to like this in PoE, if this was able to be put on a weapon swap, you'd be able to basically summon the extra totem without the actual downside, because it would only be in effect while you were holding your second weapon. So this is to prevent any abuse cases like that, to make sure that that doesn't occur. Temporary minions not reserving spirit. I believe this is probably in regards to like summon raging spirit minions, or if there's some sort of like phantasm on kill or something like that. Yeah, something like that. I believe summon raging spirits does have its like base spirit, but it's not going to increase the spirit that it's the spirit amount that it is holding is not going to increase based off of how many of these that are alive. It just reserves 30, you know, before you put any supports on it. It's not going to increase for every single summon raging spirit you spawn. It's just going to be, if you have 0 of these in play, or 5 of them in play, or 10 or whatever amount, it's still going to be 30. I think that's just clearing that up for people who were worried about it. And then skills from ascendancies level up based on your character level. So as you level up, the level of this Summon Infernal Hound will continue to increase as well. I presume it's going to, it'll hit level 20 at some point, probably around level 90 or something. I think whatever level things are technically supposed to be leveling to 20 at, there's going to be a number for this. In PoE1, it's level 90 is when your skills are supposed to be hitting level 20. So I expect it to be the same. And then same thing here. Crits have no specific interaction with ailments. They're just more likely to inflict ignite and shock because they deal more damage. So since the ailment threshold that they discussed about here in regards to ignite and shock, it's just based off of the total damage of the hit. Has the higher damage of the hit, then the higher chance of applying the ailment. So yeah, I think this is a good set of tips and I guess changes to definitely keep in mind. There's going to be a lot more of them. I want to try to basically create another video kind of leading up to launch for, again, returning players, for new players, to just things to kind of look out for, or basically things to keep in mind when trying out Path of Exile 2, and to make sure that you have a good time with it. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and other than that, see you in the next one.